Most people think roughage is just cheap filler feed for livestock. But here's the truth. Without roughage, a cow's entire digestive system can start to fail. In fact, the rumen, the largest stomach chamber in cattle, buffalo, sheep, and goats, depends on roughage to function properly. And here's the surprising part. Some roughage feeds are highly nutritious and boost production, while others provide almost no real nutrition at all. So what exactly counts as roughage? And how do different types affect your animals? Let's break down all the major roughage feeds used in livestock diets. If you raise cattle, buffalo, sheep, or goats, roughage will make up most of their daily diet. In many farms around the world, animals get 50 to 80% of their feed from roughage. But here's the problem. Many farmers focus heavily on concentrates like grain, while roughage is treated like just something to fill the stomach. In reality, roughage does something much more important. It feeds the rumen microbes, keeps digestion stable, and helps animals turn plant fiber into energy. In this video, we'll break down every major type of roughage used in livestock diets, including grass, hay, silage, straw, and crop residues. And more importantly, you'll learn how each one affects digestion, nutrition, and animal performance. Before we look at different roughage feeds, we first need to answer one simple question. What actually makes a feed roughage? The main difference is fiber. Roughage feeds contain large amounts of plant fiber, especially materials that come from plant cell walls. These include cellulose and other structural fibers that animals cannot easily digest on their own. This is where ruminant animals are special. Cattle, buffalo, sheep, and goats have a large fermentation chamber called the rumen. Inside the rumen live billions of microbes that break down fiber and turn it into usable energy. Roughage also plays another important role. When animals chew fibrous feed, they produce a lot of saliva, which helps keep the rumen environment stable and healthy. Without enough roughage, digestion can become unbalanced, and animals may develop problems like rumen acidosis. So roughage is not just filling the stomach, it is actually fuel for the rumen system. Now that we understand what roughage is, let's start with the most natural roughage animals eat every day: fresh grass. In grazing systems around the world, livestock animals spend much of their day eating pasture. Fresh grass can actually be very nutritious, especially when it is young and actively growing. At this stage, grass contains more protein, more moisture, and better digestibility. That means rumen microbes can break it down more easily and turn it into energy. But as grass gets older, things begin to change. The plant develops more fiber and tougher stems, which makes it harder for animals to digest. As a result, the nutritional value slowly drops. This is why pasture management is so important. Farmers often rotate grazing areas to keep animals eating younger, more nutritious grass. In many parts of the world, pasture is also the cheapest roughage available, making it a key feed source for livestock. But grass is not always available year-round. During dry seasons or winter months, farmers need another way to store forage. And that's where hay comes in. When fresh grass is not available, farmers often rely on hay. Hay is simply grass or legumes that are cut and dried so they can be stored for long periods. By removing most of the moisture, farmers can keep the feed for months without it spoiling. This makes hay very useful during winter or dry seasons when pasture growth slows down. Good quality hay can still provide valuable fiber, energy, and sometimes protein. For example, legume hays like alfalfa usually contain more protein than most grass hays. But hay quality depends heavily on when it was cut and how it was stored. If the plants were harvested too late, the hay may contain too much tough fiber and less nutrition. And if hay is stored poorly, it can develop mold or lose nutrients over time. So while hay is one of the most common roughage feeds, its value can vary a lot depending on quality and management. But some farmers preserve forage in a very different way. Not by drying it, but by fermenting it. That preserved feed is called silage. Instead of drying the forage like hay, farmers store fresh plants in airtight conditions where they begin to ferment. During this process, natural bacteria produce lactic acid, which preserves the feed and prevents spoilage. Silage is often made from crops like corn, grass, or sorghum. One advantage of silage is that it usually keeps more moisture and energy compared to dried hay. Because of this, silage can be highly digestible, making it a very popular feed on many large dairy farms. It also allows farmers to store large amounts of forage in a relatively small space, often using silos or bunker pits. But like other roughages, silage quality depends on proper harvesting and storage. If air gets inside during storage, the feed can spoil and lose nutritional value. Still, when made correctly, silage becomes one of the most efficient roughage feeds for supporting milk production. But not all roughage is grown specifically for livestock. In many farming systems, animals also eat roughage that comes from leftover crops after harvest. Straw usually comes from grain crops like wheat, barley, or rice. After the grain is removed, the dry stems remain. These stems can still be used as roughage for animals. However, straw is very different from grass or silage. It contains very high fiber but very little protein and energy, which means animals cannot get much nutrition from it alone. Crop residues work in a similar way. Examples include corn stalks, sorghum stover, and other leftover plant material after harvest. These feeds are widely used in many parts of the world because they are cheap and easily available. But because they are lower in nutrients, farmers often combine them with concentrate feeds or better quality forage to balance the diet. And this brings us to one of the most important factors in livestock feeding. It's not just the type of roughage that matters, it's the quality of that roughage. Two farms may both feed hay or silage, but the results can be completely different depending on how good that roughage is. High-quality roughage usually comes from young, leafy plants. It is softer, easier to digest, and contains more nutrients for rumen microbes. This allows animals to convert fiber into energy more efficiently, which can support better milk production, weight gain, and overall health. Poor quality roughage is very different. It often comes from over-mature plants with thick stems and tough fiber. These feeds contain more indigestible material, so animals get less usable nutrition. When roughage quality drops, farmers often have to feed more expensive concentrates to make up the difference. That's why successful livestock systems don't just focus on feeding roughage, they focus on feeding the best roughage possible. Because in ruminant animals, roughage isn't just filler, it's the foundation of digestion, health, and productivity. Roughage is only half of the livestock feeding system. The other half is concentrates, and many farmers misunderstand those two. So if you want to fully understand livestock nutrition, subscribe to Livestock Insights and watch our next video on all concentrate feeds explained.